Now, joining me in the studio and throughout the show, actually, tonight's panel are political commentator Reem Ibrahim and broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. But Andrew?
Very simple. We live in a very diseased information space at the moment, and all generalisations are false, including this one. So the reality is that the more people who come onto the platform, the more likely you're going to have hate speech. And the problem with this, there's no standard definition of what hate speech is. You look at the United Nations, they talk about discrimination or derogatory based on sex or religion or so on and so forth. The BBC, in their defence, and it's important that we have a balanced discussion, because neither side is completely right. It's wrong for Elon to claim there's no hate speech. Of course there is. And it's wrong for the BBC to say, without evidence, that it's increased. They did provide the evidence afterwards. You're right to point out that it was lazy, if you like, not to go in with the hard facts and figures. But on their website, they talk about it. They give examples of people who've been allowed back on the platform who've got extreme views. So Andrew Aglin, for example, the founder of the neo-Nazi Daily Stormer website. You've also got Liz Crokin, one of the biggest propagandists of QAnon conspiracy theory. And they also quote those tweets. I won't repeat them because for legal issues, but they are there. And there's also...
Yeah, no, please don't.
Yeah, no, I won't. But that's the point, isn't it?
OK.
They needed the evidence, and don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story is the important point.
I mean, I dare say it's the definition, isn't it? It's the definition of hate speech that is the problem here. So it actually begs the question, is racing a cruel sport? Now, Andrew, animal rights actually say that several horses fell during the Grand National today, which is, you know, what their protest had actually been trying to stop. Where do you stand on this? Should we just say, look, this belongs to a bygone era, we need to be kinder to animals, etc., etc.?
I think, I mean, any death in any sport is absolutely tragic. And I was heavily involved in Formula One in the early sort of 80s and 90s, and they introduced further safety measures to ensure that they're preserved on that sort of basis. The sensible people, and as I say, let's shed more light than heat on the subject matter, is absolutely look at ways to make it safer. I did put a bet on somebody gluing themselves to the jump, and I won on that one. But the principle is exactly that. Let's look at ways. Any death is one too many. So let's look at ways that we can make it safer. But it's a glorious sport. The people enjoy it and so on and so forth. There's a debate about getting rid of the whips and so on and so forth, which you can encourage the horse to carry on anyway. So make it safer. The horses do get incredibly well looked after generally. We were talking about them being pampered in ways that most humans are not pampered. So it's got to be right. Let's look at ways, but let's look at practical ways to make the sport safer.
You're right. I mean, there is this sort of branch of left-wing politics that tends to be particularly militant, where they are militant to, I mean, all things British culture, but also they just kind of want everyone to be incredibly miserable. We saw this with the sort of potential protest with the coronation coming up. I mean, these people, this sort of particularly militant branch of left-wing politics, they just tend to want to be miserable and want to ruin everything and take all good things away from us, all good British things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you do have to have a balance, though, and there are some points. If it can be made safer, make it safer. I think it's wrong to dismiss everything on political grounds. I say let's shed more light and less heat.
Absolutely, but they've already been doing that. I just want to read out this from the British Racing Authority. They've said in a statement released earlier this week that there have been huge improvements in recent years at Aintree Racecourse to improve the welfare of horses racing there. Changes introduced since 2012 include adapting and rebuilding the fences, facilities and stables. From the very moment a horse arrives, the most important thing to the racecourse is its safety and welfare. Now, we'll end it there, but I mean, I must say, 150,000 people attending, millions watching it on telly. I think it would be a crying shame, actually, if they get their way, and that's it for that. Now, a man has been labelled a horrible TERF. Now, a TERF, for those who don't know, is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. I think we've all been called that these days. By employees. This is by employees at a bank after he criticised this bank's transgender policies. The bank in question is Monzo Bank, and Monzo Bank's policies include checking not assuming pronouns, gender-neutral toilet facilities, and describing maternity leave as primary caregiver leave. Now, this man has been mocked by staff online, which came to light after he made a Freedom of Information request. Will you be banking with bonds?
Well, what's interesting is the language, isn't it? Because you get a horrible turf as opposed to a nice one. I mean, what's that about? The principle is exactly this. It should come out of respect and working out a balance and being sensitive about a conversation. Here at GB News, we have gender-neutral toilets, for heaven's sake, so we look at that sort of thing.
Not deliberately, not by design, not by design.
Maybe economic reasons, but the principle is that we do. I think respect works both ways, and you're right, absolutely, to turn around and say the primary birth giver, it's rather like talking about chest feeding as opposed to breastfeeding and so on and so forth. You need to respect all people in the conversation and work out why there is that. Because what started the whole thing about woke originally was a positive thing. It means you're awake and conscious
certainly
of
not anymore.
that sort of stuff. And that's the problem. It's become a
I don't think it ever
derogatory term.
was.
Well, I don't think it's because it's become a derogatory term. I think it's because everything associated with it, in my view, is actually censorship.
It's become too extreme. Become too extreme on that.
And debate.
Well, it's no longer about freedom, and it's no longer about being awake or being sort of understanding the world around us, but actually being a complete sheep towards this sort of incredibly militant leftist ideology.
It's hijacking the language, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
If you hijack the language from what should be a positive thing about inclusiveness should be positive, you turn around and respect everybody in the conversation, it's got to be much better.
Well, yeah, as long as they respect our free speech rights, that's all I can say. Now, this is a good one. After a woman found a seal in her potato peel whilst preparing Easter Sunday lunch, people have started sharing their own spud animals, from couch potato sloths to yam walruses. I wonder, have you ever encountered a cloned creature in your kitchen? Send in gbviews@gbnews.uk. But, Andrew, have you ever found a seal lurking in your...
I love it, and there's great stories about it. It's called Pareidolia, is what it is. So there's a wonderful name for it, where human nature, go back to the caves and about preservation, it's finding faces in places where you wouldn't normally see it. And they think of it for two reasons. They think about basically children, because they need it to getting that sort of instinct, but also to preserve yourself for safety. So if you saw something in which looked like a tiger, a saber-toothed tiger...
For our radio listeners, we've got the seal, the spud seal.
Oh, fantastic.
In image there. And it does actually look like a seal.
Because you can see the face. I love it.
Because, Reem, I actually often think whenever someone says, oh, look up at the sky, you can see, I don't know, the image of Christ, or you can see, I don't know, whatever else.
See it.
I always think, one, yes, I can never actually see it myself. Maybe I'm just blind. But secondly, I'm like, are you insane? Like, what are you seeing that I'm not?
Well, I mean, with the clouds thing, it's quite interesting, because I quite like looking up at the sky and trying to find different shapes in the clouds. But again, if you're looking at it at a slightly different angle, you can never sort of see it as the same person. I love this, that you see it in potatoes and the spuds, because of the different colouring and the different shapes you get to see, and it's so exciting. I remember being a kid and just like staring at the walls and patterns in wallpaper and trying to find little shapes, and it's a nice pastime than looking at your phone all the time, isn't it?
It's also very profitable. I can tell you, in 2004, a cheese sandwich, which apparently bore the image of the Virgin Mary, sold for, I think it was $28,000.
Wow. Well, there we go. Get looking, get
Huge
hunting,
money.
get
Huge
hunting,
money.
people, get hunting. Now, with me still is the political commentator Reem Ibrahim and the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Andrew, you've heard what people have had to say there, Lois and Ed. Who were you with?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a little Punch and Judy show, isn't it, really? And what I always say, look, let's shine more light and less heat. It was devoid of facts and figures.
Well, there were a fair few
Well,
there.
not nearly enough. I mean, firstly, who is the climate party? It's a tiny little party, which the first time any of us heard of it, but good luck to them anyway. What's interesting is fear is the biggest way of selling anything. So you have to turn around and say, look, what does it mean to be ULEZ compliant? I can tell you, virtually every petrol car registered since January 2006 will be ULEZ compliant. So if your car is not zillions of years old, then you're not going to have an issue. What you need to look at, in not just the economic debate, you need to turn around and say, look, what's the impact going to be on people coming in to the theatres, to the restaurants and so on and so forth, and to the shops?
Yeah.
And it's a massive thing on that basis. We need to have far more facts and figures to make informed decisions.
Well, I mean, there was a French, in the press today, there's a French man who's got quite the shock when he received a bill through the post, but Reem Ibrahim and the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn still join me now. Reem, are you a Titanic fan? I mean, I regret to say that you make me feel ancient, because you are how old? Remind my
I am
viewers.
20.
20. So you weren't even around. You were
was not even
star in the
born.
sky.
I was not even born when Titanic came out, but it is still one of my all-time favourite movies.
Good.
I absolutely love it. And I think that what I particularly like about the movie is the class dynamic between Rose and Jack, and how they sort of came together, and Jack sort of entering this world of the upper classes. I think it's fantastic and a beautiful love story.
Andrew, you have historic connections.
I do. I'm 25. I've just had a tough paper round. But no, absolutely. So my grandfather, the wonderful William Wheeler, he actually supplied silk blinds to the Titanic. So a great chance to remember him as well. And it's extraordinary because they tried to, bizarrely, resurrect the Titanic a couple of times. People are they've been trying to build the new one. They must learn from history, I would have thought. But that's what they tried to do. But William Wheeler, remembering him, he did supply blinds to the Titanic.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's fantastic.
I mean, Reem, when it comes to these sort of issues and these documentaries being created to commemorate these events, do you think harking back to the past is useful? Because, I mean, it's a whole question in and of itself. We live in an age in which actually history and the politics of that history are indeed controversial.
They are controversial. I mean, as a history university student, I've got to say I totally think that this stuff is fantastic, and I think that actually looking back on our past is the only way we can look towards the future and learn from the past. I mean, a lot of these political issues that we have at the moment when it comes to freedom of expression or with educational reforms, a lot of these things are things that people fought for 100 years ago as well. I mean, 1912 was a commemorous year. I mean, we were just about to enter a world war, and there's a huge amount of politics that happened over there during that time. I think we have a lot to learn from the people of the Titanic.
Andrew, remembering history important?
Oh, absolutely. As a futurist, this is what I also do. We predict the future, have a 100% record. And the reason for that is I always say people turn around and say history repeats itself. And the reason history repeats itself is because we don't learn the lessons from history. So look back at virtually most major events and learn those lessons.
So have you got any time for the activists then that say, actually, you know, we should just denigrate history?
I think that we should always shine a spotlight on it. We should question everything, because we're drowning in a sea of information, misinformation, most of which is false, which is where we started on the show.
All right, yes, we did indeed. Well, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure joining the two of you, Reem Ibrahim and Andrew Eborn. Thank you very much
Pleasure
for
to
your
see
time.
you.
Very much.
Now, folks, indeed, again, my thanks to my absolutely brilliant panel, which I'm sure you agree, as indeed all of my guests. Neil, I believe, is going to be back next week. If he's not, I'll be knocking at his door and saying, come on, Neil, we need you back, because he is absolutely brilliant. I'll be back in 1 hour's time, though, after Calvin Robinson has his fantastic show for more feisty debate with the Saturday Night 5 team. This week, we've got Dominique Samuels, so you won't want to miss out on her brilliant contribution. But for now, I leave you in the capable hands, as I say, of Calvin Robinson and his Common Sense Crusade.